Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. A special air quality statement was issued by Environment Canada as many regions of both Alberta and BC continue to battle wildfires. It was back to school for students in our region. BCN's Micah Quinn chatted with city officials about the harmonization of the new school and playground zones. And the trial of Freedom Convoy organizer Tamara Leach began today. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Well, we woke up to some poor air quality once again here in southwestern Alberta due to the wildfire smoke coming from both BC and other parts of the province. The BC Wildfire Service says weather over the long weekend caused aggressive fire activity on a number of active blazes in the province. The service says the Vanderhoof and Fort St. James fire zones saw less moisture than expected, and strong winds helped to fuel the flames. In the Okanagan, meanwhile, the McDougall Creek wildfire is now around 137 square kilometers, and even with a bit of rain on Sunday, the fire still grew. Hundreds of property owners remain on evacuation order and thousands more on evacuation alert. There are more than 430 fires burning in British Columbia. More than 2,070 have been reported this season, burning over 22,200 square kilometers. As for our province here in Alberta, we currently have 81 wildfires which are still burning, including in the Mackenzie Lake area. Fortunately, 74% of the blazes are now under control. Only 2 wildfires are still listed as out of control, and 19 are being held. Alberta Wildfire says 70% of the fires were started by lightning, around 10% are under investigation for being suspicious, and the rest were caused by humans, which means campfires that were left unattended and errant cigarette butts. So far this fire season, Alberta has seen 998 wildfires. The city of Calgary broke a record for most smoke hours in 1 year over the weekend. The number came in at 482 smoke hours, which surpassed the 2018 record total of 450 hours. With all the smoke comes poor air quality, so how do we keep ourselves and our families safe and healthy from such poor air? The folks with Environment Canada have a few tips.
Wildfire smoke obviously contains many pollutants that can have serious health effects. So the best way to protect yourself is to stay inside when you can. Close those windows and doors. Use air filters to clean your indoor air when possible. And if you have an HVAC system, set that to recirculate the air inside instead of bringing in that outside air in. You also want to stay informed about wildfire smoke, air quality, and your health. So you want to stay up to date with the latest information, and you can find that on the WeatherCan app or on our website at weather.gc.ca. And you can get more information about wildfire smoke in general at canada.ca/wildfire-smoke.
Special air quality statement was issued from Environment Canada, and it continued for many regions of our province due to the wildfires. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, any potential rain on the horizon for our region to help maybe clear the air a little bit?
Well, yes, but not until late Wednesday afternoon, Hal. So we could see a 30% chance of showers with a high of 20 degrees. Not too bad. Now, you had mentioned the air quality index, which earlier today was sitting at 6, which is considered moderate risk compared to the same time yesterday when we were sitting at 7, which is a high risk. So remember, even a moderate risk means that those most susceptible are advised to reduce strenuous outdoor activities. An air quality rating is expected to improve slightly as we look towards tonight and Wednesday. So that's the good news. And I'll be back later in the show to give you all those details, Hal.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The Labor Day long weekend wrapped up, which means that students headed back to school here in Lethbridge. New harmonized school and playground zones are now in effect. BCN's Micah Quinn heard from city officials at a local elementary school about the very important day.
The harmonization of school and playground zones took effect on Tuesday morning, as motorists will now have to adhere to a 30-kilometer-an-hour speed limit from 7:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily.
We want to go towards a future in city of Lethbridge where we don't have any major injuries or fatalities resulting from road collisions.
We asked staff with the Lethbridge Police Service if they will be monitoring these new harmonized zones for the first few days of school.
I'm not sure. We're struggling with numbers and resources, so we try hard to be out, especially for the start of the school year, just have that visual presence, and patrol members are encouraged to be out active around the schools and their zones of responsibility or their beats, just to encourage and be a reminder that schools are back in, to slow down, exercise more caution with the little ones.
Officials with the Alberta Motor Association told us that the school crossing guard program is key to helping students stay safe and reminding drivers to slow their roll.
Our patrollers are out here doing an important job getting those students that are walking from our community to schools safely, and it is a busy zone and area, and it just really encourages that walking is a safe method for students to get to school.
Having a team helps a lot because then you're not on your own, so then there's more people to help you out.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Well, it was also back to school for the post-secondaries here in our city. Staff at Lethbridge College say it's been a very busy time for them as there's been a rise in the number of students this year. More than 1,400 attended the new Student Orientation Day.
We're pleased to say that our enrollment numbers are looking really strong across all of our programs. Enrollment at this point is up about 10% over this time last year, and of course we'll know more details on that in the next couple of weeks as things settle down, but we're very pleased to know we're up about 300 students or so over this time last year, and it's looking really positive.
The University of Lethbridge also welcomed new students to the post-secondary on Tuesday. Staff with the U of L say 960 students will take up housing on campus, including a record 100 international students. A new report by the Alberta government does not paint a pretty picture for post-secondary students. The study, which was completed by Leger, says 50% of students surveyed said they've reported some form of sexual or gender-based violence. This is slightly higher than the Alberta average of 43%. Leger surveyed students from 26 publicly funded post-secondary institutions from January to March of this year. The survey received close to 13,000 responses, representing a reply rate of 5.8%. Staff from the University of Lethbridge's Students' Union are not happy with the numbers. They want Advanced Education Minister Rajan Sani to address the issue.
We are calling on the government and the ministry to provide some funding to implement safe sexual violence prevention centers on our campus. Right now at the U of L, we only have one person that is helping with sexual violence prevention, and one person can't do it alone. We need a team, given the numbers that we're seeing here, 50%, half of students on our campus are saying that they're experiencing some form of sexual violence here. So I do believe that the government needs to provide some funding and intervention and supports for different PSIs around Alberta to have these centers and to be able to have students access these centers in a safe manner.
Bridge City News reached out to the office of Minister Sani to comment on the story. They sent us a statement which in part read, on February 21st of 2022, Alberta's government announced $2.5 million in funding to support gender-based violence prevention on campus, including but not limited to training, awareness, and updating and implementing more supports for survivors on campus. A portion of this funding was also used to develop and conduct the student survey and create the report released today. The Alberta government announced a new $27.3 million investment to support growth of innovative research at our province's post-secondary schools. Officials say the funding will help accelerate research and commercialization in the areas of medical devices, electronic health, clean energy, along with space and defense technologies.
All of these fields have really exciting research projects in our post-secondary institutions here in Alberta, and this funding announcement today is going to help to drive that research even further forward, continuing to build on the momentum that we are seeing in Alberta's tech sector. We have seen Alberta leading the country in terms of venture capital investment growth. At a time when investment in other provinces is on a downward trajectory, we continue to see growth. That is great news, folks. It is great news telling us that Alberta's tech sector is booming. It is growing. The momentum is more exciting than we've ever seen it before, and I'm confident that investments like today's $27.3 million announcement will continue to drive that forward.
If you were looking forward to hopping on a nonstop Arizona-bound flight straight out of Lethbridge this winter, it looks like you're going to have to wait a little while longer. The city of Lethbridge announced recently that flights on Flair Airlines direct from Lethbridge to Tucson will be delayed yet again. In fact, they will not be happening at all in 2023 as the airport works to make improvements. Last year, it was announced that Flair would be offering the service out of Lethbridge beginning December 2022, and that was delayed to sometime in 2023. Jason Elliott, Director of Corporate Services with the city, says the Lethbridge Airport is undersized to accommodate Boeing 737 airplanes. One of the city's priorities is the expansion of the terminal and runways to allow more room for larger aircraft. Alberta Health Services is declaring an E. coli outbreak at 6 daycares in Calgary and 5 other sites that share a central kitchen. Some of the facilities which have been ordered to close include daycare locations at Braeside, Bridgeland, Centennial, McKnight, along with Kid Space and Vic Academy in Okotoks. They're ordered to remain closed until all of the issues are resolved. Families with kids who attended the locations will be sent letters cautioning them of the outbreak. ACERT, or the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team, is investigating the circumstances of a 31-year-old woman who died while in Lethbridge Police custody. Police say the intoxicated woman was arrested back on September 1st for aggravated assault. Now, following a medical check by EMS, she was taken to hospital, but then released back into police custody the following day. She was placed in a holding cell where she was later found dead. ACERT investigators arrived in Lethbridge on September 2nd, where the investigation is ongoing. A police task force set up on the Blood Reserve here in southwestern Alberta is having a lot of success in shutting down drug trafficking here in our region. The number of overdoses on the reserve also continues to drop.
So in April, we started a drug task force unit, and I was fortunate to be a part of that. We were able to have quite an impact on the community. Like, definitely police presence is a thing. It causes people to be aware of what they're doing, but really the stats speak for themselves. We went from about 26 overdoses a month down to 5 or 6 after several major arrests.
The task force worked in collaboration with the Blood Tribe Housing when any suspected activity when it comes to any kind of drug trafficking or illegal activity. They work pretty quickly to come in, board up the houses after a successful search and arrest, and evictions are usually handed out that same day, and then of course they're repurposed, renovated. There is a waiting list for families and other people that are needing homes, so they want to make sure that kind of happens as quickly as possible.
Those on the James Smith Cree Nation say they're still grieving a year following a stabbing rampage in the Saskatchewan community. 11 people were killed and 17 more were injured on the First Nation and in the nearby village of Weldon back on September 4th of last year.
Well, I knew each individual. I knew them all personally. They were all my family, my friends, my relations. They were there. And to have, like, this is a close-knit community. Like, everybody knows everybody here. Everybody knows everybody's. But nowadays, there's so many kids that are, you know, just popping up. There's a lot of urban people that are coming, that are registered here. They come from the reserve. I mean, they come from the cities and towns with their families. They want to start a new life. They want to get away from the gang life. So they come home. They say, okay, I'm not a gangster anymore. I'm done with that. I want to raise my family in a net community like ours. But then the thing is that people have to realize that a lot of the past will follow you to wherever you go and catch up with you.
The criminal trials involving Freedom Convoy organizers Tamara Leach and Chris Barber have begun in Ottawa. Police, city officials, and former Mayor Jim Watson will be among 22 witnesses called to take the stand. Crown Attorney Tim Radcliffe says he will also submit more than 100 exhibits at the trial. Political reporter Brian Lilly says it appears to be a lot of political theater and a strong show of force by the Trudeau government.
This is a show of force by the government, just like they used to show of force on the Emergencies Act. You know, I'm I'm split on the Freedom Convoy. I know some people love it, think it was the best thing ever. I said to you at the time, look, they made their point. They should have left earlier. But I was against the Emergencies Act. I find this whole thing to be a bit of theater from a time that most of us have forgotten. You know, we've moved on from the pandemic. We've moved on from the restrictions the convoy was fighting. But the people prosecuting this have not.
Make sure you catch the full interview with the always colorful and opinionated Brian Lilley, columnist with the Toronto Sun, coming up in the second half of our program. Manitoba Premier Heather Stefanson launched an election campaign today. Voters will be going to the polls in that province on October the 3rd. Stefanson, who became Premier 2 years ago, is trying to leave the Progressive Conservatives to a third straight majority. Now, opinion polls suggest it may be an uphill battle as support for the Tories has dropped sharply since the start of the pandemic. The opposition NDP have been leading in the polls, especially in Winnipeg, where most legislature seats are concentrated. Ontario's Housing Minister Steve Clark has stepped down from cabinet. It follows a scathing report from the province's Integrity Commissioner, who found Clark violated 2 sections of the Members' Integrity Act as the government removed land from the protected Greenbelt for housing. Commissioner David Wake found the Greenbelt land removal was marked by unnecessary hastiness and deception. Clark apologized.
I accept that I ought to have had greater oversight over my former chief of staff and over the process. And to Ontarians, I want to say very sincerely that I apologize that I did not.
The Integrity Commissioner said he put his head in the sand. I would say that this minister, with 40 years' experience, knew what he carried to cabinet, knew what he asked his cabinet colleagues to support, and to say here that he needs to fix the process is not accepting responsibility.
Well, it was quite smoky and hazy again due to a lot of the wildfire smoke, which has made its way here to southwestern Alberta. Fortunately, we may see some shower activity to help clear the air a little bit. Full weather details are on deck. Environment Canada issued an air quality statement for much of southwestern Alberta again today due to the wildfire smoke. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, will the air be improving for our region anytime soon?
Well, Hal, an area of high pressure recently brought that smoke into the region from British Columbia, and we are currently seeing that flow slowly shift a bit as the high moves eastward and the winds are rotating clockwise around that. So air quality rating is expected to improve slightly as we look towards tonight and Wednesday. Speaking of which, we are seeing those 30% chance of showers on Wednesday, high of 20 degrees. That's going to happen later in the afternoon, though. And then we're back to sunshine Thursday right through the weekend. High of 21 on Thursday, 23 for a high on Friday, all the way up to 24 Saturday, 26 on Sunday, and 27 on Monday as we round out that 7-day forecast, reminding us that I think summer's not quite over just yet. Average high for this time of year, 22. 7 is the average low. 36 was our high temperature on this day. That happened back in 1967. And back in 1956, we were looking at a low. It was a record, -2. The sun rose this morning at 6:52. Sunset this evening at 8:07. We're looking at just over 13 hours of daylight, about 13:15 there. Okay, on the west coast, looking at sunshiny conditions for the most part. Victoria, a little bit of sun and cloud coverage there. 19 for a high, 20 for a high in Vancouver, mainly sunny skies there. Edmonton was under an air quality statement today. As we look to tomorrow, though, mainly sunny conditions, widespread spoke tonight, though. 18 for a high there, 18 in Calgary as well. Now, Calgary looking at a 30% chance of showers tomorrow with a risk of a thunderstorm, so that should hopefully clear up some of their smoke as well. In Saskatoon, looking at 30% chance of showers early in the morning, and then mix of sun and clouds with hazy conditions, high of 21 degrees, 26 for a high in Regina with a mix of sun and cloud. Regina looking at local smoke and mainly sunny conditions, 30 to 50 winds though. 20 degrees for a high in Winnipeg. Winnipeg was also seeing that air quality statement in effect today, but tomorrow, mostly sunshiny conditions. As we look across central Canada, we are seeing heat warnings in effect all over the place. In fact, in Toronto, that should be lasting until Wednesday. In Ottawa, looking until Thursday, and those hot, humid conditions continuing in Montreal until Friday, at least 32 for a high, in Toronto 33, and Ottawa 32. Montreal tomorrow. Toronto also seeing a 40% chance of showers and a risk of thunderstorms tomorrow. As we get into the east coast here, Fredericton sitting at 29, mainly sunny conditions. 22 for a high in Halifax, seeing 2 to 4 millimeters of rain and 20 to 40 km winds. 30% chance of showers in Charlottetown with also 20 to 40 km winds. High of 27 degrees in St. John's, Newfoundland, looking at mix of sun and cloud and fog dissipating in the morning. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
A new report says the real estate market will be a little softer this fall. Average home prices are predicted to remain flat across Canada. The forecast comes at RE/MAX Canada's Fall Housing Market Outlook. It is based on an online survey suggesting that those who plan to buy or sell a home in the next year will wait and see how the interest rate changes play out. Mortgage rates have risen sharply as the Bank of Canada has raised interest rates in an effort to bring inflation under control. Inflation currently sits at 3.3%. The average house price in Lethbridge right now is $370,000. Now that's according to Jeff Reimer, a Lethbridge realtor with Royal LePage. Mr. Reimer says what's really popular right now, however, are homes in the $200,000 to $300,000 price range.
Last month, I was at a house on the west side, about $300,000, and there was a lineup of agents and buyers on the street, about 5 to 7 groups of them, and they had 5 offers on the house. So it's not in every price point, and certainly not typical in the $600,000 price point. But yeah, in that lower price point, 2 to 300, and even 3 to 350 still is pretty slim pickings.
Jeff Reimer from Royal LePage will also discuss how the recent high mortgage rates have been impacting first-time home buyers and those who are looking to renew their mortgages. He'll have details coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 131 points on the day to finish at 20,413. The Dow was down 195 points to 34,641. The S&P 500 was down 18 on the day to 4496, and the Nasdaq was down 10 points to 14,020. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.14 to 86.69 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 18 cents to 2.58 US. Gold was down 16.57 on the day to 19.2612 US an ounce, and silver was down 45 cents to 23.54 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.80 per bushel, barley's at $7.51, canola's at $18.13, and corn is at $9.14 per bushel. Live cattle were down 20 cents to $179.95. That's for the October contract. Feeder cattle were down 48 cents to $251.38, and lean hogs October contract was up $1.25 to $83.18. The Canadian dollar was down slightly to 73.29 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the special air quality statement continues for most of Alberta due to wildfire smoke coming in mainly from British Columbia. BC Wildfire Service says more than 430 fires are burning in BC. Around 2,070 have been reported this season, burning over 22,200 square kilometers. Meanwhile, here in Alberta, we currently have 81 wildfires which are still burning, including in the Mackenzie Lake area. Fortunately, 74% of the blazes are now under control. Only 2 wildfires are still listed as out of control, and 19 are being held. The trial of Freedom Convoy organizers Tamara Leach and Chris Barber began in our nation's capital today. Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly will have details for us momentarily. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's top local stories, be sure to check out our website, bridgecitynews.ca. The Trudeau government says it may act against the provinces if the provinces move forward with legislation requiring schools to inform parents about gender changes. Now, to talk about this in more detail is political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, the Trudeau Liberals have issued the warning, but will the provinces comply? Parents say they want in.
This was a very bizarre move by the Trudeau Liberals. First off, they have no constitutional jurisdiction over education. So I don't know how they would act to say, look, you can't have this school policy. This started with New Brunswick declaring back in, I think it was late May, that they were going to require schools to inform parents if a child wanted to change their name, gender, or pronouns at school. What's happened over the last several years is individual schools, school boards, school districts, depending on where you are and what they're called, they have come up with policies that say if a child wants to change their gender or their pronouns at school, don't tell mom and dad unless you have the express consent of the child. And for example, here in Toronto, it specifically says in the policy, regardless of how young the child is. So it can be a 4-year-old.
Wow.
Well, that's not something that sits well with parents. Justin Trudeau has tried to say that those that support this, and now it's New Brunswick has gone in this direction. Saskatchewan's Scott Moe has said this will be policy. Ontario's education minister, Stephen Lecce, told me last week that he didn't say he was coming out with the policy, but he expects school boards to be open and transparent with parents and to fully inform them. But the Prime Minister has called this far right. And then Marcy Ian, his Minister for Women, Gender Equality and Youth, came out and said that they may act. She gave the warning, hey, we're watching you. And again, they portray this as a fringe position. It's actually the Trudeau Liberals that have the fringe position because it's only about 15% of Canadians agree with the position of the government, which is that no, parents shouldn't be informed unless the child wants them to know.
Wow.
This is an Angus Reid poll released last week showed that 78% of Canadians believe that parents have a right to be informed. Now, they were split on whether the parent should be required to consent to any changes, but 78% said they must be informed. 82% of households with children under the age of 18 felt this way. So this is not a fringe position that the provinces are taking, but the federal government is taking a very fringe position. And I'm not sure what they would do, but this seems to be one of the many culture war issues that the Trudeau Liberals want to campaign on. This is what is driving them these days. It's not the economy. It's not dealing with inflation. It's not the housing crisis. These are the issues. This and issuing travel warnings for LGBTQ Canadians for going to the United States, that it's a dangerous place for them. These are the issues that animate them, and they seem to be offside many, many Canadians.
Brian, speaking of travel, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in Indonesia. It's part of a tour which will see the PM make stops in Singapore and India as well. Now, Brian, you say that unlike other countries, Trudeau is not lecturing about carbon emissions or LGBTQ2+ issues. Why do you think that is?
Because he is very selective. He's situational on his commitment to these issues. Indonesia is a major oil and gas producer. Their carbon emissions, they're not quite as high as Canada's, but they have been going up. Don't expect him to go there and lecture them, and he won't do the same. Like I just mentioned, the Trudeau government issued a warning to Canadians that America is a dangerous place for gays and lesbians. I don't think anybody actually believes that, but they put that out there campaigning on it. And so when I realized he was in Indonesia, I looked up, what is he going to lecture him the way that he did Italy's prime minister a few months ago? No, he's not going to lecture on these issues. He's not going to lecture on carbon the way he does Canada's provinces because it's very situational. Justin Trudeau isn't about governing and getting results other than electoral results. If he thinks saying or doing something will benefit him in terms of voter support, then he does it. Otherwise, he stays silent. And he likes to pick on Italy's prime minister, a woman. He likes to mansplain to her, but he's not going to go to a Muslim man who heads up a large country in Asia and lecture him in the same way that he did Italy's prime minister.
Last week, Federal Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault was in China. Now, he earned a pretty strong rebuke from Alberta Premier Daniel Smith for being critical of the Alberta oil sands while in Beijing. But Brian, isn't China one of the world's worst polluters?
It's absolutely the worst polluter, and it's still on track for building 1 to 2 coal-fired electrical plants per week. That's how many they're building. Meanwhile, Stephen Guilbeault, before he left, was lecturing Danielle Smith and the province of Alberta on still using fossil fuels. Alberta is actually making great strides moving away from fossil fuels, but it's never going to be zero. The province doesn't have the hydroelectric capabilities of a British Columbia or Quebec. It's simply not feasible. Guilbeault lectures Alberta, then goes to China as an advisor, executive vice president of a group that advises the Communist Party of China on climate. And then while he's there, he also starts spouting off about Suncor. The CEO of Suncor said, look, we're going to continue to invest in the oil sands. We're going to use these assets. He also said that he was still committed to net zero by 2050, which is their goal and has been for some time. So nothing changed. But Guilbeault, while in Beijing, decided to turn around and lecture Alberta. And then just a few days later, while still in Beijing, started lecturing about Atlantic Canada's gas regulators. Each of the Atlantic provinces has a government agency that sets the price of gas, and he was lecturing them for allowing price increases at the beginning of July. Beginning of July, that's when Atlantic Canada got hit with the national price on carbon, the carbon tax, plus the clean fuel standards, what Pierre Poilievre calls the second carbon tax. So the price of gas went up. He lectured them saying they shouldn't have done that. That's the entire point of his policies, is to drive up the price of gas so that you use less of it. But, Guilbeault, playing political games and attacking Canada from Beijing while not pointing out that they are the world's worst polluter.
Brian, a lot of Canada will keep their eyes on Ottawa this week. The trial of Freedom Convoy organizers Tamara Lich and Chris Barber has begun in our nation's capital. It's expected to last around 16 days. Now, that doesn't really sound especially long considering the amount of charges that were laid.
We're talking about mischief charges, though, Hal. So this is a bizarre situation where we've got the full weight of the state coming down on Tamara Lich and Chris Barber over mischief charges, conspiracy to counsel mischief, and charges like that. This is a show of force by the government, just like they used to show of force on the Emergencies Act. I'm split on the Freedom Convoy. I know some people love it, think it was the best thing ever. I said to you at the time, look, they made their point. They should have left earlier. But I was against the Emergencies Act. I find this whole thing to be a bit of theater from a time that most of us have forgotten. We've moved on from the pandemic. We've moved on from the restrictions the convoy was fighting. But the people prosecuting this have not. Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson showed up early. He's going to be one of the witnesses. They spent a lot of time in the morning at the courthouse just setting up the ground rules, setting up the technology, establishing procedures. They're going to allow journalists to record the proceedings, but only for note-taking. And if you broadcast any of it or post it on social media, well, you're going to face consequences. It's things like that. But this is a very long, drawn-out procedure for charges that I'm not even sure should have been laid in the end.
Now, Brian, the trial will still be going on when the House of Commons resumes sitting. That is, if it resumes right away. There's speculation that Parliament may not resume until later this month.
Yeah, there's speculation that Justin Trudeau could prorogue. I don't know what they're going to do on that. The rumors have just started, trying to get a sense of, okay, is this just people with idle gossip? Is this them taking the temperature of the room? Remember that prorogation is a normal tactic of government. It is there to reset, to have a throne speech, to establish a new parliament. There's nothing wrong with it. But of course, when Stephen Harper did it, they lost their minds over that. And they made it sound like an awful, dirty word. They've used it themselves. They used it to get out of the We Charity scandal. They've had a really rough summer, and they might do it then. Or they might look and say, depending on how the Freedom Convoy trial is going, they might say, hey, we can use this to our advantage, get the Conservatives back in there, and we can attack them in the House of Commons. I could see that happening very much as well.
Now, Brian, against the backdrop of the rising poll numbers we've seen recently, Pierre Poilievre and the Tories will be meeting in Quebec City this week. Now, it's a policy conference and the first time the party has held a convention since Poilievre was elected as leader. What are you expecting to come out of this convention?
Well, I think you're going to see a lot of excitement and anticipation and hope. And, for anyone that was thinking that Pierre Poilievre was the wrong choice for the Conservative leader. I think on this given weekend, you won't be hearing those voices because he is doing so well in the polls right now. If an election were held today, the federal Conservatives would win a majority government. That sort of momentum, that creates unity, that creates discipline. There's going to be some policy discussions, though, and some motions that some could be problematic, some could be policy discussions that are actually opportunities, things like talking about freedom of speech, bodily autonomy. They could go either way, depending on how the discussion plays out, and we're going to see. But I think really a lot of unity and excitement on this, because they are riding so high in the polls right now, and the Trudeau Liberals have taken a beating.
Now, you've been looking a little more in depth into some of the polling numbers here, Brian. Where has Pierre Poilievre been gaining a lot of support lately?
In all the right places. I've been saying to you for a long time, Hal, he's got to win over suburban mothers, especially in the Toronto area, in the Vancouver area. British Columbia is the reason that Justin Trudeau won the last election. So stop blaming Ontario and Toronto. He's got to win in that lower mainland where the Conservatives used to do well, and he's doing that now. He's picking up. He's well ahead of Justin Trudeau among female voters. He's long been well ahead of Justin Trudeau and the Liberals among males, but he's also picking it up in the right age groups, leading among 18 to 34-year-olds in several polls, leading in every region of the country except Quebec. That is impressive. But also an interesting poll that came out just before Labor Day showed Pierre Poilievre leading among union members. Now, Angus Reid said, okay, you're a union household, you're a public sector worker or union member or a private sector. Which party best represents you as a union member? And the answer was Pierre Poilievre. And the Trudeau Liberals were third, just like the Trudeau Liberals are third among young voters. Justin Trudeau's strongest support is among baby boomers now, and he's not even leading with them anymore.
Brian, there was some online controversy over the weekend over a viral video of Pierre Poilievre saying that Justin Trudeau and his father, Pierre-Elliott Trudeau, were both Marxists. Now, first of all, do we know if it's true? And secondly, do you think this will hurt the federal Tories?
It's the type of story that's a bit of a distraction, and it's more likely to gin up Trudeau supporters than harm him. But it's also the type of thing that he should avoid, just because he's winning over those swing voters, right? Those people that cast their ballot with Justin Trudeau the last few elections, that he's got to get them over to his side. You don't want to give them any reason not to. So that doesn't mean you've got to be wooden, but it's an offhanded remark. Well, they're both Marxists. If you've seen the video, that's literally how it is. He's dismissive of them. I would say at one point, Pierre Trudeau most likely would have identified as a Marxist or a communist of some type. He was very much on the far left, and he was described by some within his own party as he was seeking the leadership as a socialist. Is Justin Trudeau a Marxist? No, he doesn't think that deeply. But Pierre Poilievre, as I said, just avoid those sorts of things. Speak to voters on the issues that matter to them, and the fact that Justin Trudeau is hurting them financially right now, that inflation's not under control, that mortgage rates are seeing 30% inflation, that food is seeing 10 to 20% inflation, depending on which metric you're looking at, that these are the things that are driven in part by Trudeau's policies and that they need to be changed, rather than flip comments that his Pierre supporters will find funny, and they might agree with it. But you're always thinking about those swing voters and making sure that you're bringing them onto your side and not giving them a reason to reconsider or stay away from you.
So, Brian, let me ask you something. We've talked about this in the past. You've got your pulse on our nation's capital. Will we be seeing a fall or maybe even a winter or a spring election? Will Jagmeet Singh finally pull the plug on this coalition?
I don't think so. And I think these polling numbers make it less likely. Back in the end of May, we were discussing that the polls would show that if we had an election then, we would have ended up with the same parliament. But then the Atlantic wall fell for Trudeau. He's struggling in Quebec. He's lost support in Ontario and BC. Pierre Poilievre has gained that support, a lot of it. Jagmeet Singh is not benefiting from the main left of center party falling apart. So he is not in good shape to go to the polls. If you were Justin Trudeau, would you want to face the electorate when there's a good chance that you're going to get your party wiped out? Probably not. Some of the discussions I'm hearing in Ottawa right now are, does Justin Trudeau stick around? We've got a column that's about to run in the Toronto Sun from Stephen Ledrew, who was president of the Liberal Party back when Jean Chrétien was in charge. And Ledrew tells the story of how he went to visit Chrétien and said, look, your time is up. You've had a good run. It's time to step down. He doesn't see anyone around Trudeau with enough gravitas to tell Trudeau, you've got to go. But, so is there enough time for Trudeau to step down and let somebody else try and take over and salvage things? Or is it just going to be a bloodbath? And if it's going to be a bloodbath, he's going to hold on to power as long as he can. It might remind me of Ontario in the mid-90s. Bob Rae went almost 5 full years because he knew no matter when I call the election, we're going to be decimated with the NDP in Ontario. He was right, and they've never been the same since. Trudeau could be facing a similar sort of thing.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today from Toronto.
Thank you.
There's so much to talk about in regards to Canada's housing crisis, with some markets experiencing a serious shortage of housing. Rising inflation has increased interest rates as well. Many Canadians, including young married couples, are finding it even more difficult to afford a home today. Now, to talk about this in more detail and the housing market here in southwestern Alberta is Jeff Reimer. He's been a Lethbridge realtor for 30 years with Royal LePage. Jeff, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Nice to be with you, Al. Nice to chat with you.
You as well, Jeff. Now, how have rising mortgage rates really been impacting many of your clients?
Well, it's certainly affecting how much they can qualify for and making people be a lot more budget concerned and how much they're going to spend and, thinking twice about going higher and, trying to stay lower in their price budget to keep the costs down monthly, for sure.
Now, Canada is in a bit of a housing crisis right now, Jeff. We've seen it all across the country here. We don't have enough houses available for many people, which raises prices. It's supply and demand. Interest rates are going up as well, making things less affordable. Some say the government should make more land available for developers. Others say maybe we should look at immigration, what's happening there. What kinds of solutions are you hearing from those in the real estate sector?
Yeah, I don't discuss that at a deep level too much in my job because I'm more on the front lines. But, certainly, we need immigrants. This country always has had a lot of amazing immigrants. And the challenge is obviously finding the proper housing, but it's partly complicated by more urbanization, I think. People are less interested in going to the rural areas. As kind of a general trend, but we've got lots of land here on the prairies. So for us, it's always a matter of where you want to be and if you're going to want to be closer to the bigger centers. But there's lots of great spots available in towns in and around southern Alberta for sure.
It's funny, my parents themselves were immigrants when they came over from Europe. I'm a first-generation Canadian, and my father went to Vancouver first, and he says, way too much rain. He couldn't handle Vancouver. Went to Regina, Saskatchewan. He says, it was way too cold, and then way too hot. So that's when he settled on Calgary, and he came to Alberta. So, Jeff, what is the housing supply like right now in southern Alberta? How many listings are there right now compared to, let's say, a year ago?
Yeah, there's certainly less this year. I'd say residential, various types, probably about 100 less. So I think there's about 460 or so roughly residential this year. Now, that's a little bit tough stat to be exact on because it depends what genres you include, but I don't think that includes manufactured home parks. But yeah, right around 466, including condominiums and detached houses. And last year, it would have been about 100 more, give or take. So it's certainly less selection right now.
Are manufactured homes becoming a little more popular?
People that don't want mortgages and when interest rates go higher tend to lean to consider those more. You do have the monthly pad rent, which is like having a chunk of a mortgage in itself. If you pay $600 a month, that could lend you around, or you could borrow about $100,000 or whatever based on that monthly cost. But Yeah, I think people do try to be, especially older and senior populations, they dislike mortgages, and when rates go higher, even more so. So they tend to take their cash, even if they have a big monthly pad fee. They still like to be mortgage free, and so when interest rates go higher, manufactured home demand, generally in Lethbridge area and southern Alberta, goes up.
And I think they've come a long way since the early days back in the 70s
Oh yeah,
and
way
80s,
much
right?
more.
They've come a long
Oh
way.
yeah, way much more insulation, better build, more versatile floor plans, more choices. For sure, that's come a long way.
Now, what's the biggest complaint you hear from those hunting for a home right now when it comes to things that are making it a real challenge for them to purchase outside of higher interest rates? I know for myself, I just renewed. I went from 2.79 4-year closed to a 5.09. But you know what? That's a huge hit, but that's not bad because right now, that was like 3 weeks ago. Now it's 6.75.
Yeah, yeah, you can probably get closer to 6 if you shop around a bit. But yeah, the definitely it's making it tougher on buyers for selection, and they feel more rushed in their decision making. So rather than looking at a few choices and taking the time, and they feel rushed in a decision, especially if you happen to be in a multiple offer situation. So in some price points, especially the lower ones, it's still common to potentially be in a multiple offer situation, and then you feel rushed on your decisions, and you don't always make the perfect choice every time in terms of dates and in conditions, and you feel pressured to do that. So not finding as much selection as some folks might like, especially in the lower price points, and then the challenges of potentially multiple offer situations. Sometimes you might try once or twice and not get the house you want, so it's very frustrating.
Do you find with multiple offers as well, sometimes people want to come in with a clean offer so it's not subject to financing and home inspection, so they have a better shot at getting the home?
Yeah, that's sometimes considered, and you have to be real careful with that because, generally I'm going to recommend a home inspection and subject to financing, even if it's just a small amount, to be safe. But yeah, for sure, that's always an enticement to a seller to take something that's cleaner. And that's a challenge with folks because banks right now aren't super quick. So a lot of them are wanting at least 2 weeks for a condition of finance. And in the past, that would have been just longer than necessary, but now it's kind of very common to have a couple of weeks for mortgage condition.
So Jeff, what's the average home price right now in Lethbridge?
For a detached, it's around 370, 375, I think. It fluctuates a little bit here month over month, right? So it's hard to be exact, but right now it's around that 370 for a detached home. Of course, if you include condominiums and manufactured homes, that's going to lower that average. But yeah, it's about 370, which hasn't changed a ton over last year, but in different price points and categories, it has changed quite a bit. So if you're going to buy a condominium, let's say, or a half duplex, those would have raised up from last year. Whereas if you're buying a $600,000, $650,000 house, there's more selection in that price point, and that may not have gone up and may have even have inched down a bit.
So what prices are really selling the fastest right now? Is it a lot of starter homes that maybe empty nesters want to move into and young couples maybe getting their first mortgage, their first home?
Absolutely that. And of course, our student population in Lethbridge. So, and that overlaps all those genres, right? Because when you're downsizing, you're coming off maybe a big 15 or 2,000 square foot house and you're downsizing into 1,000. Or when you're a starter house, yeah, you're looking and overlapping that genre. And then of student housing and revenue buyers now as well, because the rents are decent for landlords, especially if they have good equity and they're not in high interest rates. So all the genres overlapping right now in the affordable ranges. So yeah, 200 to 300, very active. If you have a good house listed 300, you might get multiple offers. And last month I was at a house on the west side, about $300,000, and there was a lineup of agents and buyers on the street, about 5 to 7 groups of them, and they had 5 offers on the house. So that's not in every price point, and certainly not typical in the $600,000 price point. But yeah, in that lower price point, 200 to 300, and even 300 to 350 still is pretty slim pickings.
So that house on the west side with the multiple offers, what did it end up selling for?
It went for over full price, and my buyers went in. They had a unique condition, but they were over full price, and they weren't considered or they went with the offer that was thousands over full price in that case.
So Jeff, are there certain areas of the city that tend to be more popular for buyers right now?
Well, the west side has a bigger land base, so there's more sales over there now. I think there's more over on the west side than north and south combined right now for homes. So, and out of town buyers, which we have more of right now. We have BC buyers that are taking advantage of the higher prices there, cashing in and then moving here and having some extra cash left over and getting a better property or just downsizing and then setting aside money. We're seeing a lot more of that from Ontario and BC. And, they don't mind a little 2-minute drive across the river valley. So, the old school Lethbridge Southern people, you say, oh, I don't know why you'd buy way over there on the west side. But, that 2-minute drive for out of towners that have been commuting, half hour, an hour to work every day, that's nothing. So the west side is very popular, but south is strong, north is strong, and areas around Lethbridge right now too. The rural communities have a lot of strong demand right now as well.
Let's talk a bit about that. Maybe people want even more bang for their buck. They're going to some of the bedroom communities like Coaldale, Raymond, and Nobleford. I even have a few friends who moved to Tabor, and it wasn't just for the corn.
Yeah, well, corn's good right now. I had some last night. Boy, it was sweet and good. I love Tabor corn. Great reason to live in southern Alberta for sure.
Now, is a variable rate mortgage a good option in our current market, Jeff, or are people now leaning more towards the fixed mortgages? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it all comes down to monthly costs, right? And when you're talking about these urban centers, for sure, Nobleford, Coaldale, Raymond, those areas are, almost hotter than Lethbridge in certain parts right now because of people trying to keep their costs down. And the variable rate and fixed rate mortgages, it's a personal choice. You need to, talk with your family, talk with your professional and talk about options. It depends where you're at financially and your tolerance for risk. But right now, with uncertainty about them going up, I think more people are probably leaning to fixed. I'm still floating a variable right now and kind of regretting it. I should have locked in a while ago. And you say, oh, I should have locked in then. So I might as well just, stay with my variable now. But, if they go up again, I'll be kicking myself saying I should have locked in when it's 2% or 3% or 4% or 5%. And now it's up at 6%. So I've been told by certain professionals, oh, don't worry, it's just temporary. It'll go up and then it'll come down. But the economists have been wrong right now. So even with the inflation, they're just going to, sometimes people think they're just going to keep raising them. So it's hard to know. So it's a very personal choice. You need to seek advice from friends, family, and certainly professionals.
It's interesting. Friends of mine who locked in on a 5-year close 3 years ago for 1.99. They still have 2 more years at 1.99.
I know. Why didn't I lock in? I feel kind of stupid. But, riding the variable, you think, oh, it's going to go up. And then, oh, what if there's recession? It'll come down. But right now, the rates are higher. And I sure wish I would have locked in.
Are we seeing more people getting longer amortization lengths in their mortgages? And how long of an amortization period can a person get these days? Can we go beyond 25 or 30 years like we see in the States?
Right now, I think we're at 25 for high ratio loans. So if you put down less than 20%, I think that's still at 25. And then if you're a conventional loan where you put down 20 or more percent, then 30 years amortization is an option. And that's the banks don't have flexibility beyond that. But will that happen in the future? Possibly, yeah. Will they, lengthen the amortizations to go 35 or 40 years again? Very possibly, with the rates going higher because they want to keep housing costs down somewhat while they try to stop inflation. And I think people within that 25-year or 30-year max are certainly probably pushing those limits more than ever with the higher interest rates to try to keep the monthly costs down for sure. I spoke with a mortgage broker today and she said, yeah, you're 25 and 30 there, capped, can't change that. But more people that might not have, pushed that 25 or 30-year limit before are pushing those limits now because of the higher interest rates for sure.
Let's talk about first-time homebuyers once again, Jeff. And with the stress tests, are you noticing maybe a decline in younger people looking for homes?
I don't have hard, fast stats on that, but I don't know if how much is really changing there because when they raise the stress, there has to be some of that because if people have to save up that little extra down payment. But 5% is still 5%, isn't too much different when house prices raise or the interest rates are a little higher. So your minimum down payment to save up doesn't change a lot, so people can still get in, but they're having to consider the lower price points because of the higher interest rates. And then with the supply being tighter in those lower price points, it's making them maybe hold off or check it out and decide to wait a little longer. But myself, like I said, I don't have the hard facts and stats on that one, but my buyer pool still varied with young people and middle and old, for sure.
And you know what a lot of people have to consider as well, it's not just the 5%. Let's say it's a $300,000 home, you need to come up with 15 grand, but then there's also the legal fees, there's the home inspection, which we talked about, the hookup fees. I mean, it all adds up after a while, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. You're probably going to want another 1.5% of your purchase price for costs for lawyers are pretty affordable, though, and we need them. They're important. And the home inspection is very important. There might be a tax adjustment. So if the owner's prepaid to the city a certain amount, you're going to have to, the lawyers will prorate it to the day. So you're not getting, hurt by it, but you do have to come up with some money ahead of time. So you should, besides your 5%, you should have roughly maybe another 1.5% of your purchase price saved up for your extra costs.
So for the rest of this year and potentially into 2024, how is the real estate market looking here in southwestern Alberta, Jeff?
Yeah, well, right now with supply down, I would think that the prices should stay strong. I think as winter comes, certain buyers may not choose to move here in winter, but we're still going to see that immigration from the larger centers to the, to southern Alberta. So I think it's going to be good. It's hard to judge with the interest rates. I mean, we haven't seen historical acceleration of the rates that's in my lifetimes, I don't think ever. So when the rates go up from like 1.89 up to 6%, right, you're looking at a huge uptick, and that's hard to judge how that's going to happen. But with the rates still like 6%, when I bought my first place, I locked in for 7 years. I was thrilled at 7.625. So, when I look back and then I hear other stories, people go, oh, I had something at 19 or 20, right? So really 6% is pretty affordable. So I think, the economy in southern Alberta is, it's got challenges, but we're still a great place to live. There's still jobs available. And the house prices affordably according to across the nation are still, quite affordable. Even for rents, we think they're high here, but, other centers are even higher. So I think Lethbridge is going to be good and stable. It's a fairly balanced market. Right now in the lower price points, you're going to say it's more of a seller's market. But, with I think right now, because there isn't a ton of supply, that prices are going to do okay. Maybe there'll be more selection come up as the interest rates take more of an effect. But how it goes shortly after that, it's hard to judge. We haven't experienced, and then changing economic factors. We'll see how it goes. But I love Lethbridge. I love southern Alberta. I love Alberta, and it's a great country. So I think people want to move here, and people are moving here, and people are moving to Lethbridge. So I think it's going to be good and stable and remain fairly strong.
It's great to hear. Jeff Reimer is a Lethbridge realtor with Royal LePage. Jeff, thanks so much for your time today.
Hey, nice speaking with you, Hal. Thanks for the opportunity. Have a good day.
You too. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.